Hello and welcome, Exiles, to look at an EK Triggerbot Saboteur. You'll notice a lot of Ethereal knives spamming everywhere. How is that occurring? It's thanks to the perfect crime. This ascendancy point gives you trigger bots. Trigger bots effectively trigger spells for you at double the rate. So for example, cast on crit, if I were to cast on crit a spell, on my normal case, I would cast one spell, but if I had trigger bots, it casts two spells and then applies this less damage multiplier to it. Fun thing is, this is pretty abusable in certain cases. For example, Arcanist Brand. This is a trigger where the less damage is applied to Arcanist Brand, but not the skill it is then triggering. So you get around that less damage multiplier. And on top of that, you can nest your trigger to get multiple occurrences. For example, Arcanist Brand can then get triggered by automation support combined with brand recall. So you nest a trigger within a trigger, and instead of 2 procs, you get 4 procs, so on and so forth. You get the idea. Surgeon General has an excellent video explaining these mechanics, which I will link below for anyone that wants to look more in depth to trigger mechanics. But I'm going to leave it at that. Nested triggers gets a lot of spam, and it costs a lot of mana. And to solve that mana, we use Whispers of Infinity. Ultimately, after doing it this way, I gotta be honest, I'm not sure if this is a good enough solution. Trigger bot spam casts so many skills all at once that the mana cost is quite unbearable. In my opinion, I think the only real solution to this is insane minus flat cost and reduced cost to just make your skill not cost anything, because this was simply just not enough. It felt like I was PKing my character whenever bosses or enemies had immunity phases, but it's the solution we went with. I thought it would have been good enough. It was not good enough. Well, I mean, it was playable good enough. We were able to kill Ubers, but you can see in the clips that regularly, whenever I'm not leeching from enemies, I am degenning my character. To follow that up with, we also combine this build with Impale and Ulnatol's Ring. Impale through Entropic Devastation. If you have spell crit, you will then impale, and we were going pure fizz because of the Ulnatol's Ring. I actually was really impressed with this ring in the build because it opened up a lot of possibilities for fizz scaling. It says, hey, if you have a bunch of increases to physical damage, you'll then get a bunch of physical aura effect. This is actually really powerful for fizz auras specifically, because not many of the other elements or aura types have that many things that are tagged with it, but fizz has 4 very powerful auras that are tagged with this and that are useful. For example, Flesh and Stone. Enemies take more damage from fizz hits. This does get scaled by the aura effect. With full effect of the ring, it would be 50% more damage from physical hits. That's an insane multiplier. Pride scaled with this up to 100% more if they've stood in your aura effect for 4 seconds, or 50% more if they were just, you ran past them, they were nearby. Then you have things like Determination, gives a bunch of armor scaling if you want to go into physical reduction through armor, which that was one way I took a shadow character and ended up with 20,000 plus armor without really investing into armor on my tree. Then on top of all that, technically, you can go for a vulnerability aura. I didn't get to the point of progression where I could get the reservation space for vulnerability blasphemy, but this is one of the few cases where a blasphemy aura actually gets scaled. Normally on the passive tree, every single aura node says increased effect of non-curse auras. It pretty much always specifies this. Wherever you find aura effect, it almost always says non-curse, i.e. it doesn't work with blasphemy. However, this ring is increases and reductions apply to the effect of auras from physical skills at 15% of their value, and it doesn't imply any non-ability to work with curse auras, thus it enables something like blasphemy. So I actually like this ring a lot for physical builds because it enables 3 huge damage multipliers: Pride, Flesh and Stone, and Vulnerability, on top of a defensive aura in Determination. Definitely pretty interesting. The hard part about it is getting that much % physical damage scaling. For our character to try to get close to that amount of physical damage scaling, we used a Light of Meaning with a bunch of small passives within the radius. We used Elegant Hubris with notables like increased fizz damage like this. We also used 3 physical clusters. Each physical cluster was giving us about 120 damage each, or 120% fizz, and on top of that, we had both of our graphs have rolled % fizz. Between all these sources, we got about 800% fizz. It was quite a hefty investment. I didn't feel like I had a lot of extra passives to go for other things, but it does get you a pretty big multiplier in that you get Flesh and Stone 50% more, Pride up to 100% more, Vulnerability would be, if I got it on a Blasphemy Aura, close to 100% increased damage taken, and then Determination for Giga Pride effect, which is pretty dang insane for scaling in terms of if you wanted to do a physical build. Now, aside from those mechanics, another thing I wanted to test out was the idea of using Specters as a damage multiplier for a non-Specter build. The idea was we would grab Umbral Army, which gives 10% defense per raised Specter, combined with Bitter Bind Point, which gives spell crit chance per Specter. And my thought process was I was going to use the double Specter helmet in combination with this to get 10 Specters, thus getting 1000% crit chance and 100% increased global defense. However, there was a small problem. Apparently, for some ungodly reason, trigger bots are considered minions, and thus I couldn't use the Dark Monarch with Perfect Crime to get the 10 Specters. So it was a bit of a bummer there. One of my initial plans for the build just fell through the moment I realized that trigger bots had apparently, quote unquote, the minion tag and thus couldn't be activated with Dark Monarch. However, it still brings some nice benefits. For example, the Specters we had in this build were the Perfect Forest Warrior, which gives permanent onslaught and cull. We had the Perfect Goddess Corpse, which gives permanent discipline, which is about 300 flat ES. We have the Perfect Pain Artist, which gives Zealotry 15% more spell damage, like 30% spell crit chance, and he also gives about 30 crit multi. We had the Dancing Dervish Sword, which gives 30 Impale effect. We had the Power Charge Monkey, which gives power charges. Technically, you could do Perfect Warlord, which would give endurance charges. He just started to annoy me, so I took him out because he just spammed too many war cries, and it was a bit annoying. There was also the Thunderbird, which gives permanent grace, which was quite a bit of evasion scaling for our character. I took this out as well because the scream effect kind of randomly muted my audio, and I just found it a little bit annoying. The idea is, though, with those 10 Specters, and you could probably take this sort of idea and use it on a lot of different characters, you get a bunch of powerful benefits from the Specters, and then on top of that, you get your crit chance mostly solved for a spell build. That's the idea I was going for. Now, some thought I have behind this is, one, a lot of the good Specters are really annoying. They make a lot of annoying noises, so that's a downside. And two, it does start to be pretty big socket pressure having an extra 4-link dedicated to Specters. Now, one of the things I was asked about is survivability of these minions. And I gotta say, honestly, as a character that is the only investment I have into Specters is the defense Umbral Army node, which comes with 25% minion life, and the +1 Specter node. The only investment in defense is those things and the gem supports. This shield comes with 90% Specter life, and then with that, I just have a Convocation I occasionally trigger, and my character is using Rational Doctrine, which gives Conk Ground to basically whenever I use this, it'll give Conk Ground that will linger on them for 4 seconds. So that's how they're getting some regen. With this, which is very low, I think, investment in terms of minion survivability, they didn't really die much at all. The only times I had them die on this character was when I ran the Poison mod, the T17 Giga Poison mod, which is just super rippy for minions in general. When I played Poison Concoction Elementalist last league, that was one of the few mods that would kill my golems. Outside of that, they just didn't really die. It felt pretty decent. Sorry, that was one of the cases they died, and the other case they died was, I believe, Uber Elder. That was enough spammy damage from Uber Elder and Uber Shaper all spamming their shots that a couple of Specters died during the course of that fight. But outside that, it felt pretty good survivability, and I think this is a pretty powerful building block if you can manage dealing with noise. Now, I glazed over it, but I want to talk about Rational Doctrine, and this is one of the techs in this build that I really, really like, which is the idea of combining Rational Doctrine with Supreme Ostentation. You'll notice on my character, we have a lot of tattoos. We had a character that's using D-Term. It's using a high-level Ethereal Knives, which is a lot of dex. We have skills that cost a lot of int. So it's stretching us in a lot of attribute ways. And I also wanted to combine with the fizz damage scaling of the Elegant Hubris notables, like big notables that give fizz damage, crit multi, frenzy, stuff like that. So the thought process is, if we get the ability to have our attributes not require anything, we can very easily balance strength and int to be our highest attribute, which then enables us to get both Profane Ground and Conk Ground from Rational Doctrine. And I gotta be honest, I think I'm gonna use this in a lot more following builds. I really liked this combination of things. Permanent Con Ground giving curse reduction, regen feels really good. And then Profane Ground giving curse effect and crit chance all in one jewel socket. Very nice combination. If I ever use Elegant Hubris like Caspero in the future, I really like the idea of this because you can very easily balance. It's just about leaving a couple untattooed things and then balancing whatever source of flat int or flat strength you have, just making sure it's just a bit higher than your dex. It works out really, really well. And yeah, that's all I have to say about that. All in all, this character I had some fun with, but I wouldn't recommend it because it's just a bit awkward in terms of it felt like the trigger bots are always kind of behind you. There's this awkward place where you'll have this and then you'll go to the next pack and then it'll always kind of be behind you. That was one of my issues with it. Number two was this character is kind of you're constantly fighting the mana cost of this skill. I think this can be solved with reflected minus flat cost, but that is a ton of an extra investment on top of what we already done here. And I didn't want to take the time to reflect minus cost jewelry just to solve the flat cost of the skill. So that's one thing you could do. And then the other thing is I'm not necessarily happy with the defenses. I think the defenses of this character are okay. We get, 20k evasion, 20k armor. If I invested into suppress, we probably could have gotten better suppress chance. I was going to be at about 61% with my next level with lucky suppress. Obviously, if you could get better suppress on gear, benchcraft suppress on a few pieces, stuff like that, that could help you cap suppress off further. But all in all, I was not impressed with this enough in terms of a package. It was fine enough to do Ubers with a few deaths on some of the more rippy ones, but not comfy enough to just ignore and cruise in most map mods in terms of T17s. T16s completely fine for deathless, but once you dial it up to T17 danger levels, then you start dying more often than not. So that's kind of the TLDR on the character. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video on the EK Saboteur. All in all, I had a decent amount of fun with it, but yeah, not necessarily what I'd recommend because it's just it's just okay. Not necessarily OP, not necessarily anything insanely powerful. That is the EK Saboteur. Next build I will be working on is I have to finish up the Glad still. I need to farm currency to afford Voices Jewels to get Adorned. The final upgrade of that character is going to be going to Blood Notch setup, I think, is what I want to do with Adorned life scaling, but I just can't really afford it. So I'm doing some in-between projects, and we hit a sub goal that I had for doing a deck stacker. So we're gonna try to do a deck stacker next, and that'll be, I will do something weird. I want to try to build with the cast speed dex mod on graphs and try to do a deck stack caster. It's probably gonna be whack. We'll see. Anyways, hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. As always, thanks for watching, Exiles. Take care and peace out. Have a good one.